What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman. I'm back here with Football with Oz, Austin, for episode 10 of Against the Blitz. And following the Super Bowl, we have a full year's worth of content, film, statistics to go and look back at and make an official quarterbacks rankings list. And that's what we're doing in today's episode. I'm looking forward to it, Austin. I think we have a lot of potentially controversial players that we can find on this list that will make for good conversation.
Yeah, and we have no idea who the other one has for any of the rankings, so we're both going in blind. I imagine we'll probably have a couple similarities, but I'm kind of curious to know where the middle of the pack falls for you. So let's kind of just jump right into it.
Yeah, we decided to do it via Blaiden's QB, Blaiden's Stay Hot quarterback quiz. So this isn't entirely organic, but it is. And this is a unique way to do the rankings. And I feel like it, for me at least, made it much easier, much simpler to just get it done. And I actually feel like it was quite accurate. So hats off to Blaiden for that.
Yeah. We were gonna actually compare it to like our own created lists off of like our top of our head, but they kind of were the exact same, minus maybe a few. But I got 34 guys. Did you do 34?
I actually added. There was one guy I threw in to make 35 because I don't remember seeing his name in there. So
who was it? If you have him, I'll find a spot for him.
Kirk Cousins, I don't think made it.
Oh, really quick, I can find a spot. I'm gonna throw him in.
Added. Yeah, it was tough. Because he's certainly going to be somewhere next year.
Up and down that guy was. All right. You can continue. I'll find a spot in the next 10 seconds.
All right. So 34, 35 quarterbacks we're going to be going through, and we'll kind of just highlight the bigger discrepancies between our lists instead of getting too granular. But I feel like the best way to start it off is, I guess, just list the bottom tier of quarterbacks that I have, kind of lump together the guys that on my list all feel like they fit together to some capacity. And that starts at the bottom for me at 35 with Deshaun Watson, Will Levis, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Drew Lock, and I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to stop at Drew Lock. So that's 35 to 31.
I had Drew Lock dead last. But I had pretty similar. I was pretty similar on a lot of those. I kind of have Kirk Cousins kind of as like the barrier for that tier. If this is going off of the Kirk Cousins we saw from like the 500-yard game on, if that's what we have for the upcoming season, he's in that bottom tier. But I'm going to put him just above that for old time's sake. So I do have Justin Fields in that tier. I have Anthony Richardson in that tier. Sadly, Jameis Winston. I've watched a lot of Browns games. I could sub in Deshaun Watson for him though, for doing the Browns quarterback, and I have Drew Lock as my last place guy. I am close on guys like Russ and Levis, but especially with Levis, there's just still like an upside that I'm interested in at least, which is the only reason that he's like right above that.
Levis for me, like. That he was that guy going to this year for me. And after 2024 and like every week there was like a 5-week stretch of like, what is the next Will Levis meme? Like there was a new screenshot or play or something that he did. And it's almost, it was almost like he was doing it on purpose. Like he was trying to clip farm. Like someone said Will Levis is clip farming. Like and it felt like it because
it was bad.
It was so bad. So yeah. I feel like I had to trade out upside for just, I guess, flat out stupidity, bad decision making, carelessness. I think that was just such an all-time high for him that I couldn't discount it any longer after this season.
No, and I still have him at ranked 29th. So yeah, I still wasn't high on him by any means. He was just a little bit more exciting to me than like Jameis Winston or Drew Lock at this stage. But
yeah,
the next kind of ranking of guys are similar to guys kind of like Russ, who have flashes every once in a while where you're like, dang, they still got it, but then they don't. So I got him there. I got Rodgers there. and I got Derek Carr kind of on the edge of that tier. I have him at 24, but I also had to throw in Penix, J.J. McCarthy, and Aiden O'Connell as guys that I do think could be good, but I haven't seen enough of yet.
That's kind of where I have a lot of those guys as well. I had Penix in that range, Rodgers, Richardson. I kind of kept out of the last tier because I feel the way you feel about Levis, I think is probably what I'm feeling with Richardson. But I had the QB quiz gave me probably the most intriguing question, and I had a hard time. It was Richardson or Rodgers, and you could spin it in different ways to, find the outcome easier. But head up, if I just wanted one of them, regardless if I was winning a Super Bowl or I'm trying to build a dynasty or whatever, I didn't know. Like, do I want 40-year-old Rodgers who's going to be on the Pat McAfee show stirring up the locker room every week? Or did I want Anthony Richardson who's tapping himself out of football games? Like, where's the line with these guys? Like, it's both bad.
Yeah. Yes. Guys like Rodgers were hard to put low because they did have like some redeeming games. And the seasons weren't that bad in a vacuum. Just compared to expectations, it was rough. I've kind of been an AR apologist for some time. I've always seen like the big picture. He's also like 22 years old, but man, that season was bad. Like it was really like historically bad at completing passes. So that's the only reason he wasn't in that tier for Levis with me, because like Levis had at least like 5 games in his career where I'm like, hey, that was all right. AR has a few. He has a couple, but like I just need to see a little bit more. But he's so close for me.
This is where I also had Kirk, and I actually had Sam Darnold down here too. So I feel like that's probably a big name that not a lot of people would have this low. And I think I really just put that much stock into big game performance and his lack thereof, I guess I should say, because that was really the first big stage he had found himself on. Of course, just getting the job and exceeding expectations was tremendous given his career arc. So I'll give him credit for that. But then the next prove it point was, can you play when it matters the most? And I feel like he failed, fell on his face and didn't show any redeeming quality, failed. So that to me was enough to be like, yeah, I mean, Darnold is probably a bridge, but he's probably not going to Jared Goff it the way Jared Goff did.
Yeah, I felt like I was a little low on him. I'm higher than that, but yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat where like production wise, you could call him top 10 if you're just looking at like the raw numbers. But yeah, if you would have watched the Lions game for the number 1 seed and the playoff game that we both watched and had an episode immediately afterwards, it was a bad showing. So I'm not going to crucify you for that. I only had him a few spots higher, and these were over guys that were rookies that were also kind of a little bit unproven. So which kind of brings me to my next point, where the next 2 guys I had were Drake May and Bo Nix, who are 2 guys that I enjoy, but they're not elite rhythmic pocket passers quite yet. Like I think Darnold has a little bit of a better step than them on. Also, like production wise, they were kind of just in the middle of the pack guys. So I do have Darnold at number, I believe, 22.
Okay, I had Darnold at 24. So
yeah, I just had 2 rookies below him. So yeah, nothing crazy.
Yeah, what I did find interesting once my QB list kind of simmered down, and then of course I plugged Kirk in because this is where Kirk lies. I had JJ McCarthy at 22. I had Kirk at 23, and then Darnold at 24. So all 3 Vikings affiliated quarterbacks all in a row. And I think for me, the thing with Kirk is I'm going to ride the he wasn't fully healthy theory into the sunset and hope to God that there's something redeemable left in that corpse. So that's one of those takes where it's like it could backfire bad because we saw how bad he was, and someone could justifyingly sit here and tell me you're insane for thinking there's anything left in that old ass body, and then he goes out there and repeats it, and it's like, obviously, you moron, he showed nothing. Yeah. So it's like, you're right, and people would be right in saying that to me if that were to happen, but on the off chance there's something left.
Yeah. I mean, 2 seasons ago, you probably could have put him in that like borderline top 10 range. He was putting up fantastic numbers, but yeah, I mean, he also had the Buccaneers game the first time around where he threw for like 500 yards.
Yeah.
And was one of the best QB performances of like the entire season. So there was at least a hint of redeeming quality there. My only worry is we also don't know what team he's going to be on. Yeah. Or if he's even going to be a starter. Like, we don't even know if he's even going to leave the Falcons, because there's a whole weird money thing going on there. But he was a hard one. Like, when you told me you had Kirk Cousins, I had to think long and hard about finding a place for him, because that was a season of up and downs.
I want to know. I think you seem to like it, but my JJ McCarthy ranking, I know people would crucify me for putting him above anybody that has played a snap already. But I think JJ McCarthy with Kevin O'Connell, it's more of like a match made in heaven kind of thing than it is like being so high on JJ McCarthy necessarily. So I think he's going to really do well in that offense. I'm not sure what the highs are going to look like. I'm not sure what the lows are going to look like, but if Kevin O'Connell can make Sam Darnold look that good, I have high hopes for JJ for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was my QB4. So I had him ranked over Bo Nix, and I had him ranked over Penix comfortably for both. Because something that really does matter is like mental toughness, as we kind of saw with the Sam Darnold thing. And McCarthy's full of that. Like, he doesn't really get phased. He's physically tough, mentally tough. He's an athlete, has a good arm. He kind of has everything you want in a quarterback, especially in a Kevin O'Connell offense. So, yeah, I had him at 28 only because he hasn't played yet. And that still had him over like 6 other guys. So I like the boldness of him at 22. So I have no problem with it.
My next tier. So who was the highest guy you listed off of the last group you went off
of? 22. I had Drake May. I had him over Bo Nix.
Okay. So I'll go from there. At 21 is where I'm at now too. I had Bryce. I had Bo Nix at 20. This isn't gonna end well for me. I had Brock Purdy at 19.
Oh.
I had Caleb and Drake at 18 and 17. So that's where all kind of
one that I am similar. So the one that people are really going to hate me for, but I've kind of bet on the anti-agenda of this quarterback at 21 is Tua. Tua has not been very... When I look back at his production and at his film, God, I don't like what I saw outside of, the 2023 season. So that keeps him down. I do have Purdy at 20. Then I have Bryce at 19. So pretty similar on Purdy and Bryce, just a little lower on Tua. I have Caleb only slightly higher than that.
I'm trying to find... I'm like, Tua's not on my list. Where the fuck is Tua? I'm like, I swore Tua was right there. Oh, okay. I don't know what I screwed up. But Tua on my actual, because I screenshotted my final quiz, was 21. So I don't know what happened.
That's actually exactly where I had him. So that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Where did you say you had Bryce? 19?
19. Okay. Yeah, I loved what I saw the last half. Ever since he got benched and he came back, he was playing like a top 15, even like top 12 guy, considering his weapons he had. But I just needed to see a little bit more before I put him even higher than that.
I agree. I think that's kind of where I feel like I am with Caleb. Like, I feel like if we saw anything close to like an average season, I think he'd probably be in like people's top 13 like quarterback right now, because the guy was like the most sacked. He I mean, he looked bad in some games, don't get me wrong, but his raw ability, I think, is being overlooked because of how good Jaden Daniels played this year. Like, obviously, I'm going to tell you that I'm taking Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams right now. But
Yeah.
in 365 days time with Ben Johnson, I think, it goes without saying he was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. Caleb Williams could be the perfect quarterback as long as he mentally can handle running an NFL offense. Like,
That's
what
fair.
is there stopping him?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also odd. Like, people felt like it was pretty much a disappointment season for Caleb because of like the media's expectations, but it's never in history been a bad rookie quarterback season when you throw for 3,500 yards, 20 plus touchdowns, 6 interceptions with a bad O-line. Like, that's never in history been considered a bad rookie QB season, but for some reason people like had expectations that he was supposed to throw for like 5K and never lose. Like, I don't understand the narrative there, especially with like their inept coaching staff. I mean, their offensive coordinator, the better one, was fired from Carolina like the year before. One before that, like the offensive coordinator before that was fired in the middle of the season, and Jackson Smith-Njigba celebrated his firing. Like, bad coaching all around, bad line. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt.
What about Drake May? Do you think with how great this quarterback class was or is, do you think Drake May has any chance of being the best out of this class still, or is that ship kind of sailed?
No, I don't think it's sailed. I don't necessarily think he is the best or will be the best, but I think he could be the Herbert to this class, the Tua to this class, the Jordan Love to this class, where like he's not the best, but you can always appreciate how good he'll be. His supporting cast was beyond abysmal, like probably the worst in the NFL for a quarterback's perspective. So even though his production was actually like kind of not good at all, if you watched any Patriots game, he was the only redeeming factor on offense. So I think that almost kind of benefits him in a way going forward, where it can only get better from here, I pray, supporting cast wise. So I think in a few years, I think that he could definitely be knocking on the door of Caleb Williams for sure.
Yeah, I just found it odd that I don't even know how this happened, but he ended up at 17 on my list, like above Caleb and above Brock, and like,
yeah,
I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of it, but I didn't realize, I guess, how high I was on Drake May until I did the quiz.
I mean, he's exciting. So like, when you're given the opportunity to take him or like Tua or Purdy, obviously Tua and Purdy are probably like better now if you're wanting like production and stuff like that. But going forward, taking like the 6'4" athlete with the big arm that balled out with a terrible supporting cast is kind of the more intriguing option to me. So yeah, I mean, I had him at 22, so that wasn't even that far off.
And then at my 16, so that was my first half. So that was my 35 to 17. This is where it got difficult for me. I had Geno at 16, Baker at 15, Kyler at 14, Goff at 12, and then Goff at 13, Lawrence at 12.
I like that. I mean, I had pretty much all the same guys, just kind of mixed around. So I had Kyler at the 16 spot. I had Geno at the 15. I had Trevor Lawrence at 14, which actually kind of felt high, but like I'm a big fan of Trevor. Yeah. I mean, the only reason he's not higher is just because he didn't do anything this last season, but he was hurt. So, but yeah, I think he could even be a few spots higher. I had Baker at 13, Jordan Love at 12, and Jared Goff at 11.
Man, Goff made my life so tough with the way he went out because, I mean, like I was finally coming around on the idea of Goff, like respecting Goff like enough to have him like maybe 10. Like I was actually kind of getting there, and then he does that, and it just sucks because I feel like I look at his regular season numbers. I know how good the Lions have been these last couple of years, and I want to give him respect. I feel like I'm hating, but just once again, that there's been 2 catastrophic postseason exits that I can't help but look at. And I think his production for me is only taking him so far. It's like I want to put him higher. Like I like Jared Goff, but he fits that game manager mold more than he fits the mold of really any other quarterback in the range that I might have put him at prior to the postseason loss.
Yeah, I think without Ben Johnson too, we're gonna actually have to see him be the version of the quarterback that he's not good at being. Like I don't think that like the play action, all the creative manufactured targets are going to be there. I think that he's going to have to be what he was against the Texans, where he threw 5 interceptions, in the playoff game where he threw 3. I was kind of historically always kind of low on Goff, and then I let a few people kind of talk me into it of just being a little higher on him. People I kind of felt were smarter than me about it, but I always had doubts. And they kind of came true in the playoffs again. 11 almost feels generous because I don't know if I would personally take him over Jordan Love or Trevor Lawrence on my own football team. But production wise, he's earned the 11 spot.
That's the problem. It's like how much I need to find some sort of formula that I can use to balance out how much I take into account production and the quarterback stylistically and what they're going to be like next year. These kinds of things. I need to find some sort of checks and balances system in my own head to figure this stuff out, because a guy like Jared Goff probably isn't even top 16 if we're just looking at, for me, who he is as an individual talent. But his numbers are good. So
right. That's what I feel like a ranking should be. I feel like part of it's just me being a coward and seeing a lot of good numbers for a quarterback, but also seeing that he had one of the best supporting casts you could ever ask for, and still couldn't get it done in the playoffs. It's disappointed time and time again. So if I redid this with with 3 shots, I'd probably put 4 guys ahead of him. Now that I look back at it, and we can kind of go into the next. Oh yeah, go into Kyler Murray real quick because that was a curious one.
Oh, man, he's a guy that he's like the anti Jared Goff. He's got he's got the athleticism. He actually throws a surprisingly good ball, especially down the field. He can hit the outside, the boundary throws that a guy like Kyler Murray's height, weight, his stature, he might struggle to hit at this level. We know the whole Kyler Murray story. I think he's defied a lot of odds in physics at this level, and he just didn't pass the eye test this year at all. And I mean, his numbers were actually better than I thought they were going to be when I went and looked at them, but there were just some games where the guy, I'm not going to say I felt like I was watching Anthony Richardson, because that's not right at all, but it just really felt like there were games where I felt like I was watching him throw 6, 7, 8 straight incompletions, and they just couldn't get anything going through the air. And I do feel like part of Marvin Harrison's struggles had to have been, I didn't watch enough of Arizona's offense yet, I guess, to make this, big declaration, but I can't help but think that a lot of it had to do with Kyler.
To a degree, yeah. I mean, I think their offense is constructed odd, right? I don't think that they've constructed any of their weapons to match each other. It's kind of like they just picked a bunch of guys at random. So they don't really have any separators. They don't really have a lot of rack guys. It's kind of just Kyler Murray, take a snap and make a play. They don't have a lot of rhythm. It's a weird looking offense. I do think some of it does fall on him. And I'm going to also say, I think that part of it's on Marvin Harrison. He was expected to be this guy that can be this elite, wide receiver, win down the field with consistency, and he didn't do that. He couldn't even get open. So yeah, I had him a little lower just because the production wasn't quite there to match the guys above him. And he had a few games where he did look like that, not to be AR, but he looked like he couldn't complete a pass. But there's also a few games where he was damn near a perfect passer rating, and couldn't throw any completions. So him being up and down the board kind of put him at that 16 spot, like kind of right in the middle.
Yeah, he's a guy that the second I feel like I see a good stretch of football games from him, he can skyrocket 6 spots. Like,
yeah. I mean, I wanted him to do well. He was the guy I was kind of preaching actually as like my fantasy QB. Like get him, like don't reach on AR. Get Kyler Murray in the late rounds. Like that's my guy. And he kind of disappointed from like that perspective. But I think he's close. I think they're like one like little like slot receiver away from like actually being a decent offense.
Yeah, I agree. I want him to be successful. I feel like Kyler Murray's caught a lot of shit for no real reason other than just
short.
being he's short and plays Call of Duty like a lot of people in the United States, and people just hate on him for it. Like,
yeah, I don't see the issue there. But my 10 spot is a guy that people have been putting a little bit too high the past week, but it's a guy that I also think deserves some flowers. I got Jalen Hurts at 10 as a guy who like does show up in the big games. But not to be confused, the first 2 playoff games were bad, as we touched on a few times. So I think people are a little overreacting to his elite playoff performances, but he does earn enough to jump a few spots where I had him last week and put him at that 10 spot.
I had Hurts at my 11. I cut mine off at 12. I heard Hurts at my 11.
Okay.
I think, to your point, he finally did what you would like an elite quarterback to do with that type of offense, with that type of supporting cast. He finally did his job and more. I mean, we've talked about it time and time again now. But we can't say the same thing about a guy like Jared Goff, who didn't when he was called upon. Like, and he was actually a detriment. Like that was what I just wanted from Jalen Hurts. We finally saw it, and you're right. He certainly deserves credit for that. And then at my 10 spot, I did have Jordan Love over him still.
Fair.
I think Jordan Love is arguably, in terms of arm talent, like, he's in there with the Herberts, the Staffords.
100%.
I think Josh is just in his own universe, so I guess I probably won't say that much. But like the Herbert Stafford kind of mold, I think Love is that type of talent, and I feel like if he does get an opportunity to unlock it, it's going to have to be with a number 1 receiver. I know that whole idea is kind of departing for some NFL offenses, and Green Bay was kind of pioneering that going to this season, but they do need somebody to be the attention seeker, because they have no one stepping up, and I think Jordan Love suffered from that, especially without Christian Watson in the last game. I mean, if your offense is going to go from serviceable to absolute shit because you don't have Christian Watson, that says a lot more about your offense than it does about Christian Watson, in my opinion.
Yeah. He was a guy that I struggled with, because if you would have asked me after last season, I probably would have had him in my top 10. This season, he was off. I know he was banged up for a little bit. Had a lot of dumb interceptions, it felt like, but also made a few throws a game that, like you said, probably only like 3 quarterbacks in the NFL could make. So from a pure like arm talent, creativity, playmaking perspective, he's one of the best in the NFL. I think once he just kind of hones in, stops having like that Favre gene of just like flinging it with his eyes closed. I think once he kind of stops doing that, I think he can emerge himself in that like CJ Stroud kind of tier. Especially if like would hate to see him go, but if he gets like a T. Higgins, someone like that can be that wide receiver 1, I think that he does emerge as like a 35 touchdown kind of guy, and is definitely in my top 10 after that.
Yeah, I hope that. I think the implementation of Josh Jacobs in the run was very good for Jordan Love. Like, it didn't require him to be a Superman all the time, but I do think in order to really unlock him, he's kind of having like a reverse Josh Allen arc. It almost feels like I feel like he did like 2 years ago. He had no help, similar to Josh early on, and then in his his second year starting? Second?
I want to say, is it his second year as like an actual full-time starter? I think so.
Okay. So in his second year, he gets thrown in an offense similar to what Josh was in this year. You know, that run heavy.
Yeah.
Not many true weapons on the outside. Wasn't asked to do too much. Like, he got that early in his career where Josh is getting it 6 years in. I feel like he needs to have that middle ground period that Josh had with Stephon Diggs to gain that confidence, to really be that, you know, arrogant arm kind of guy downfield. Like, I think if he unlocks that portion and then matches it in an offense that he's in now, just like Josh is doing, if this makes sense, that's where Jordan Love can really unlock himself, I think.
Yeah. And like, he's just mentally not there with the rest of my list, I would say. But arm talent, physical wise, he's one of my favorites in the entire NFL. So I have no problem having him. Where did I have him? 13. I have no problem having him at even 8.
Mm-hmm. Who's your 9?
I had Dak Prescott at my 9. A guy with like, who's the most unnecessarily hated on quarterback in the NFL, who probably could even be a few spots higher if he just had played at all this season or played well this season. But I can't forget about what he did last year or the few years before that. Really good production, and also is a really good guy that receives hate for absolutely no reason. So I almost want to bump him up just because his haters are obnoxious.
I also had Dak at my 9. I mean, people forget that he had numbers to be the MVP 2 years ago. So, like, and he made, speaking before the show, we were talking about, you know, making an episode about the best plays, best throws, etc. Last year, at the end of last year, I had Dak. One of Dak's throws against the Giants was my favorite throw of the year. It was like coming out of play action. He was on like his own like 5-yard line, and Dexter Lawrence came in and rocked his shit. And he threw it cross field from right hash to like far opposite sideline to Brandon Cooks running the deepest crosser. And he did it while getting smoked by the best defensive tackle in the league at the time. And I was like, holy shit. Like, Dak doesn't get credit for having that kind of arm. Like, you don't think of Dak of being that type of gunslinger, but he's got it in him. He does. 100%. And that throw proved it.
Yeah, he's also like a pretty intelligent player. He's a good locker room dude, like a fairly decent athlete when he has to be, when he's healthy. There's not really a lot of holes in his game except for just QB drawing it in the playoffs that one time that made everyone reaffirm their hate towards him. But aside from that, like, he has the production pretty much every single season that he's played healthy to be a top 10 quarterback easily. I don't know why the hate is all towards him and not someone else, but yeah, I feel for him. I think he could even be higher when he's fully healthy, especially going off of 2 years ago's production.
Do you think the Cowboys will be a playoff team in 2025?
No. I think that's just because of their division now. They have to somehow hope that the Commanders get worse, that the Eagles get worse, and then hope that like they can somehow sneak in that other teams do bad. Like, they would need a lot of things to go their way with a first-year head coach. I don't think so, but I think that they could trend in the right direction for sure.
I do too. I think the Cowboys, I'll have a hard time leaving them out, assuming they don't trade Micah Parsons, which they won't. Yeah. But the fact that that's even like being rumored is annoying me. Anyway, I do feel like that's a team they could finish 8-9 or 9-8, and I'd be like very, very hopeful about it. Like, it's not like a dreadful 8-9 or a dreadful 9-8. You're like dead end season. Like, it would be a hopeful year.
Yeah, and that's what I think they'll do. I think that they easily could go 9-8. I just think that, like, I mean, I guess you can make the playoffs going 9-8. It's just kind of tricky. It just kind of relies on some luck. But yeah, I think that they could definitely go above 500. They have every tool to do so, especially if they tool up at running back. Get their defense healthy again. I mean, people kind of forget they were missing like their 2 best corners for a good period of time, missing Micah for a little bit, missing their entire quarterback for like the entire season. Like, it's important to have all those guys. So I'm not too worried.
I agree. Well, at my 8, I have a feeling we're probably going to be pretty close the rest of this way down. At my 8, I have CJ Stroud.
That's who I have.
I remember we had a conversation before the Commanders played the Eagles in the playoffs about how your quarterback rankings was featuring a showdown between CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels, where I still had Stroud kind of above him. Like, it wasn't necessarily a conversation I was entertaining yet. But then after the game against the Eagles and how I feel like he played, that's where that conversation kind of kicked in. And that's, I guess, how I'll loop Stroud in at 8, and then I have Daniels at 7. And I think you kind of convinced me at that time. And then seeing him play against Philadelphia, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Enough of the funny business. This kid's good. That's all it is. This kid's good.
Yeah, that's fair. He was a guy like, yeah, I mean, again, going off of this season's production, it would be hard to crown Stroud as anything. But remembering what he did his rookie season, even in the playoffs, his rookie season, he did fantastic, similar to Daniels. So he hasn't had the production to back it up yet. But if you watch anything of Stroud, he has one of the best, like, the most smoothest arms in the NFL, super accurate, great at downfield passer. Like, he deserves to be top 10, even if the numbers don't quite say it yet. So I think the numbers do say it for guys like Daniels, Stafford, Herbert, who are above him on my list. So I can't quite put him over them yet, but I would have no problem if someone had him a spot or two higher than that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think CJ Stroud throws like the most aesthetically pleasing football in the league.
Yeah.
Like, it leaves his hand and it just looks so perfect every time. Like, it doesn't matter where it ends up for me. Just the process of watching it travel on my screen. It's like no fun.
Yeah, even if it's picked off horribly, like it wasn't his fault. The ball looked good, like
yeah.
That's what
the spiral's tight. It floats there. It's like a slow motion movie every time I watch it. I'm like, that deserves to be like framed and like painted.
Yeah. Like, every time I watch CJ, like, him throwing to Nico Collins is like cinema. It is pure cinema. It is the best thing in the entire world.
At your 7, did you have Daniels?
No. I had Stafford there. Wow. That was the hard part. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's part of that for me is going forward. Okay. Where I'm just like, we don't even know if he's playing next year. And I think Daniels only gets better from here on out. And I love Stafford. Absolutely. I mean, having him at 7, even when he didn't actually even have great production this season, it's kind of just a testament to what I know he can do and to what he did in the playoffs. I was super impressed by. But I think also when you have a guy that just, like, he just can't really run anymore. When he shut down, he shut down. So I have him at 7. I have Daniels at 6. So they're pretty close for me. But 5 through 7, honestly, like, I could have shuffled them anyway, and I wouldn't be mad at it. I just like the guy that has a full upward trajectory when the other guy might retire or get traded at some point.
Yeah, I hear that. I had Daniels at 7, and I still had, and then I had Herbert. I had Herbert at my 6. So
I have no problem with that. Yeah.
And then Stafford at 5. Like, that's where that cutoff happens. Like, to me, Stafford could retire, this offseason, but he very well could win a Super Bowl next year. Like, be good enough to win a Super Bowl. Like, he's 100%. Playing that kind of football. And I guess when you can still hit any throw, when you can still, be unfazed by any situation, and you can stand in a pocket, get drilled, deliver, and get up on a game-winning drive, like, that's the kind of stuff he does on a regular basis. Until I feel like he can't do that, I have such a hard time dropping him below anybody that I named, because he just, to me, he hasn't shown that he's not capable of doing that anymore. And you're right, there are games where it's like, when the Rams are off, the Rams are off. And if Stafford's not going to play well, he's not just going to, like, turn it on halfway through the game. Like, it's probably just going to be a rough day for him. But when it's mattered most, I feel like Stafford is one of the most consistent big game performers in football. So
100%.
To me, he still has to be at my 5. Like, if this was like Daniel's second year, and I feel like we've seen 2 years of, like, this ice cold gene that he's got, then I think I'd entertain that. But Stafford, to me, he's got the gene, he's got the talent. even if he does retire, I still genuinely think he could win a bowl right now. So I'm gonna
I
say
think he could.
I'm keeping him at 5.
Yeah, I have no problem. Like I said, like 5 through 7, I could see you putting Herbert at 7 after what he did in the playoffs. Like it was like I could easily see that. I almost did. I almost had Stafford at 5. Like it was just like tying in production, taking care of the ball, and playoff performances, kind of all kind of weighed into my thing. And just like what Herbert did, kind of on like the similar talk, like what you said with Josh Allen, where like you go from gunslinger, airing it out constantly, to like a run heavy team, taking care of the ball. I mean, he had like his first interception in like 4 months in the playoffs. Like he had like a really good season of taking care of the ball with abysmal receivers, despite his rookie little white dude Lad McConkey. So like what he did with that, I think was pretty impressive.
Absolutely.
That's the only reason he stays at 5, with like the worst receiver in the NFL in Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer just there doing cardio every game. Like, I'm not moved. Will Dissly's disgustingly bad at receiving. I'm not moved by any means of what they have going on there. So, benefit of the doubt. I've seen him throw for 5,000 yards. Damn, he was like, I'm gonna keep him up there.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know why people like have a hard time understanding that concept, that he is, physically speaking, one of the most talented quarterbacks in football. He has produced at that level before, and because he hasn't won a playoff game yet, people think he's like, I feel like there are a good I won't say majority. There's a good chunk of people that don't even think he's like top 8, which to me is like asinine. Like that people actually feel that way.
The weight that people put on team wins is almost like, it makes me want to throw up. Like a quarterback can't be in one spot and then move 5 to 10 places just because their team happened to win. Like Herbert would have had a playoff win if his defense also didn't give up 30 points and a half that one time to Jacksonville. Like they scored enough points to win that game, where like most of these other quarterbacks with a halfway decent defense would have won. But it just so happened that he played a bad second half. His defense played even worse, and he lost. But like some of these QBs are getting playoff wins with like 15 to 20 points. That doesn't move me more than scoring 30 points and losing.
I agree. No, I agree entirely. Like the compilation you can make of Justin Herbert throws is like a Tavon Austin type type college highlight film. Like
arguably like the best throw I've ever seen in my life. I'm sure you can kind of think of the one I'm trying to talk about, where he's like, I think it's against the Giants as well.
Yes.
Where he rolls to his right, just like a flick of the wrist. It goes like literally like 70 air yards. Perfect.
On a rope, too. On a
rope.
To
like, who was that? Was that like Guyton?
I think so.
Like, it was some nobody. Yeah.
Wasn't it to like the far sideline too, like far hash?
Yes, it was like across the field, like 70 air yards, like legitimate, like on the run. It was the dumbest throw I've ever seen.
I just laugh. Like one of my favorite things is to watch big time throw like thread. Like there's this guy I follow on Twitter. I think his name is James Foster. He usually does every offseason like a thread of every quarterback's big time throws, and I love like sitting there and watching these guys like throw this ball. Like it's so fun to me. I'll be sitting there like legs kicked up, giggling with my feet crossed, my hands all nicely tucked in. I'm like, holy fuck, like, this is awesome. Just watching these guys like piss missile this football anywhere they want. And then I think that's why I still am so high on Stafford, because there are just, I remember seeing a throw after 2023. I think it was against the Ravens to Puka along the sideline in double coverage. Like the catch was like just as good.
It's like he had like no gloves on. Yeah, it was crazy.
And that's not even the one I'm talking about. That one was crazy. I forgot about that one. I'm talking about another one, actually. Maybe it wasn't against the Ravens. Maybe it was against Pittsburgh, actually, I think.
Okay.
He was, I think, in the pocket at like the 35 or something, his own 35, and he threw a rope to like the deep left sideline. It was kind of, I think it was a hole shot. I think Minka came in and rocked him. The corner playing the flat like was there, but not entirely. Like the window was still open, and Stafford somehow just lasered it. Oh my God, I could see it in my head. I'm like, holy fuck. That was like one of those.
You need to like throw the clip over that.
Yes.
Because like, I can't think of it. But yeah.
That throw was nuts. And there were a few throws that I would remember from Stafford that I think could go down as like some of the greatest throws I've ever seen. Like, I think I just have a very soft spot for this guy. Maybe.
And that's fair. I mean, I've been watching him since I first started watching football. Like, Megatron was like one of my favorite players in the league ever. So watching Stafford throw for like 5,000 plus as like a completely different player too. Like, he wasn't the Stafford we know today. Like, he was a completely different archetype of quarterback that has changed his style to become a more efficient one that he is today. So I think that deserves flowers in its own right.
Absolutely. He's gone through like hell and back, that guy. Literally.
God.
Well, the top 4, I think I know how this is going to go, but I feel like you could throw a wrinkle in here if you wanted. And I don't know if you did it or not. But I have Mahomes.
I probably didn't. Okay.
No. I have Mahomes, Josh, Lamar, and Joe.
I had the exact order, I think, but it's hard because I don't think that any of those teams would trade for the other ones. Like, I don't think that those quarterbacks would find the same success on the other teams, which is why it's hard. So, like, Burrow at 4 is hard, but, like, he also is the quarterback I would rather have in a spread passing offense. I'd prefer him over all the other guys. And Josh Allen is the one that I would want just to be a fucking gangster and, like, run people over and sling it. And Lamar is hard because he's the only one there where you want the ball in his hands to lose the game. Like, that's how you beat him, is you put the ball in his hands to lose. He's the only one there for that, but like what he can do as a runner is levels above the rest. So it was hard, but yeah, I had Burrow 4, Lamar 3, Josh Allen 2. Pat has to stay at 1 for now, but it's getting close. It's getting really close. It's getting close for me to put him at 4.
Yeah, one of my rules of thumb when talking about quarterbacks and especially when doing tiers is if you can't come up with an argument as to why one guy should be over the other, then that guy should not be in the same tier as another guy. So, like for me, at this point, no one could be in the Mahomes tier. Well, before, I would say this year, no one was in the Mahomes tier. There was no argument at all. Now we're getting to a point where we certainly could entertain it. If you put any of these guys in Mahomes' tier and you tried to spin it some certain way, then, you know, you could. It wouldn't be the most insane thing ever. But I think my issue where I'm going with this is like, is there a gap? This might sound crazy. Is there a gap between Mahomes, Josh, and then Lamar and Joe? Is there a gap between 2 and 4?
I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. I think it's like, I mean, at a certain point, Lamar is the best quarterback in the NFL some games. Like for half the season, which is why his stats were probably him and Burrow actually had the best production of all of them. Which is why it's kind of hard to say like the best one. I think when they're on, they're the most unstoppable. Like in terms of what they can do on the ground and as throwers. I would say though, like it depends if you're talking about like efficiency, or like volume, or like it just kind of depends what offense you run. Like I said before, like if I'm airing it out and like I'm down a couple scores, I'm taking Burrow. Like if the team knows that I'm only passing and I'm gonna get beat up with like the worst guard duo in the NFL, I'll take Burrow for that, 100%. Lamar, my team plays against him twice a year. I know what he can do. Like 40-something touchdowns, like 4 interceptions. Like that's otherworldly. So I don't really think there is much of a gap. The only gap was the production between 2, 3, 4, and then 1.
Yeah.
They were all way better than him this season.
That's true.
Like Burrow legitimately had like double his production and less interceptions. Double everything pretty much. Like it was ridiculous how much better they all were than him. So I'm not afraid to put them over him if he does the exact same thing next year. I'll put him at 4.
I mean, I don't disagree. Like, I do think if we get one more year of 2024 Mahomes, then he falls in the weeds with everyone else. Like right now, he's kind of the guy cutting the grass, but he'll
Yeah,
be right down. He'll be right down in there with everyone else if he doesn't turn
yeah,
it around. So, you know, that's a conversation we had last episode too. Is like Mahomes is maybe not declining, but just he just wasn't Mahomes. Like that's the
he's
best way to
human.
put it.
He
Yes,
looks human. Like,
absolutely.
like before he was like an entity, like he was a guy where like you give him 13 seconds, they're winning the football game. That's how it felt. Like you could not give him any time or he was getting points. And now it kind of feels like he makes a lot more mistakes than he ever has in his career. So I don't know if that comes down to not having Tyreek and then Kelsey also on the decline. I don't know if it's because people are figuring out their play calling. I don't know what it is. But I know that the team's not getting any better around him, so something's got to change, like we said before. But like I said, like with 1 through 4, I don't think that any of those I don't think any of those teams would trade for anyone else. I think that like you can make any argument to put one of those at number 1, depending on what kind of offense you want to run.
Yeah, that's fair. I think when it comes to getting specific with guys like this, like they're all good at what they're good at. They're all good in
Mm-hmm.
specific offenses, like you're mentioning. So what it comes down to is like, and I this is what I talk about with Jaden Daniels all the time. It's like when it matters the most, what kind of quarterback are you going to get? And I think that's kind of the reason why I mentioned, the gap maybe between the top 2 and 3 and 4, because obviously Lamar, there's questions with him when it comes
Yeah.
to winning in the moment. Burrow, it's hard to say. I mean, I feel like I will be the first one to preach that I feel like his postseason run a couple years ago wasn't special individually speaking,
No.
but he still made it, so that still says something. So it's like, what does Lamar have? Lamar has Lamar as an individual, as a talent, but that's not enough to like. That's not enough when you're going against other greats. Like there has to be that win gene, like that the whole Brady thing. Like Brady might
Yeah.
not have been. Brady was an Aaron Rodgers, type of talent with his arm at least, but he still had the win. Like people think it's so stupid. Like, oh, Brady willed his defense to that interception. Like, no, obviously he didn't do that. But I don't know. I think when you get to a level, when you get to a point, it's almost like you're at a ceiling. So the only thing that does matter is like, the wins in the big moments, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Like it's just kind of like the whole Lamar argument, which I almost put Burrow over him, was just like kind of what you were saying, or what we talked about before, was like you make him be a passer if you want to beat him. Like you shut down his running back, you shut down the run game. Their offense is horrible, and I think that you could go games or drives in a row where like Burrow, Josh Allen, and Mahomes will all for a fact they're passing. They can just run 5 wide and they can drive. I don't think the Ravens can do that with Lamar at quarterback, despite having like still reasonable weapons and a pretty good play caller. So yeah, I mean his production was the best of the best, or at least second best. But yeah, eye test wise in big games, I'm not as moved by Lamar Jackson. So I could even have him before.
Yeah, I have entertained the thought of like, why wouldn't I want Joe Burrow over Lamar? Like I get Lamar stresses out a defense differently than any other quarterback ever really has, ever. But to what extent does that really matter? Like how much does that matter? How far does that go until you're like, who is going to actually help you win the game? Like, and I think to your point, if I need a drive, like I might call Joe Burrow. Like if I need a drive at the end of a game, I might be calling Joe. And
yeah, like that's just the hard part of ranking a bunch of quarterbacks that get like 5,000 combined yards and like almost like 50 total touchdowns. Like pick your poison at this point, like this is one of like the top 4 quarterbacks This is probably the best top 4 I've ever seen in any season ever.
Yeah, talent
I'm not
wise,
taking. Yeah,
like
I'm not taking like the Phillip Rivers of the world over any of these guys at their peaks. I'm not taking them over these guys.
100%. It's a special time to be alive. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are our lists. There was one thing I wanted to throw out there because we're on the topic of quarterbacks, and it was when the Matthew Stafford trade rumors first came out, and people were talking about where he could go, and now it's started to heat up again, so it's kind of relevant. But the the Lions and the Rams have the opportunity to do like the funniest thing of all time. Like,
that would be
the funniest thing of all time.
I don't know why. I don't even know why the Lions would do it, but I would love it. like I think it'd be great for the Rams to get Goff back, but I mean, I just don't know. I feel like Stafford has like 5 years left of like decent football, but it sounds like he's only got like 1 before he's done, if he even has any at all, because like he keeps talking about retiring. I don't know where he's going or what he's got left, but I would love to see him run it back. I feel like Stafford with this current Lions situation, Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Multiple of them. Dynasty.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
Like even Stafford from like what, 2019 with like Ben Johnson and like, oh my God, imagine that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the 2 running backs, the offensive line. They would score 50 points a game.
Oh yeah. Matthew Stafford with that offensive line, he would probably have an 85% completion percentage on average of the year.
100%.
Like he probably would be struggling to hit the dirt, like with the ball.
Yeah, it's that would be the most disgusting, and that's kind of why I was not that high on Goff, because I'm like imagining other guys in that situation, Super Bowls, multiple of them already, and they haven't actually even came that close to that yet. So Stafford would. Stafford did with a worse supporting cast. So I would love to see that if for some reason that the Rams were down for, or the Lions were down for that.
That would be the craziest like storyline of all time. Like Stafford and Goff, they get traded, they get flip-flopped originally because the Rams knew that they could win, but they knew that Goff wasn't the guy, so they go and get the veteran that they knew they needed to get over the hump. And now the Rams won with Stafford, and now the Lions are experiencing what the Rams experienced with the same guy. And now they're like, wait, can we just have the other one back?
Yeah. No.
And now we'll just do what you did. Jared Goff would probably become a criminal. Like that would probably send him into a dark. I don't wish that on the guy, but talk about a Joker arc. Like poor Jared
he needs
Goff.
that. He's been too content. Like he needs to unlock that dark quarterback that starts taking over games. He needs to find his villain arc. He's not there yet. But I think trading him multiple times back and forth between fan bases will do that. So I'll sign up for it 100%.
For the same guy. That would just be sick.
Yeah.
Like getting dealt, seeing your former team win, and then getting dealt back and seeing that team win. Like, oh my God. I felt bad when I thought about it, but I was like, could you imagine like what that would do to like that would be the greatest NFL like documentary ever.
Yeah. I mean,
that all go down.
I mean, getting traded messes you up. Like, I don't know if you've seen anything about like Dalton Connect from the Lakers, but he was like going to be traded, and then he ended up not getting traded because like the guy didn't pass his physical, and he like won't play now.
Wait,
he's
really?
like refusing.
I did not know that.
He's refusing. Like he told JJ Redick, their coach, that he's going to need some time to process everything because like the team was going to trade him, and then they didn't. Now he's still a Laker, but he like won't play. Like he's been out multiple games already, and probably a few more. So like, imagine trading Goff twice. Like, there's no loyalty with anything there. Like the second like they feel he's expendable, he's gone.
I don't know why I find it funny. I feel evil. But on that same note, I do feel like, not that it would ever happen either, but the Niners should be picking up the phone. Like, hey, like, give me Matthew Stafford.
Yeah. They're the only team that could make sense because, like, I'm not paying Brock Purdy $50 million like every other top quarterback is making. But I don't see him taking 30. I don't see him doing that. So, like, I think Stafford probably only has 1 year left, so he should go to a team that has a contender roster, like the Niners probably do. But yeah, I mean, aside from them, I don't see anybody that is in like a win now roster that is like a quarterback. Maybe the Steelers, but like not even.
No.
So they're just the best ones of the bad quarterback teams. So yeah, I think like we've been talking about for like the last 2 weeks. I don't think Purdy's the guy, personally, especially for like the price point that he's probably about to get with his extension. Like, what do you think he's going to be earning?
I don't know. Some sick number. I saw a report that came out recently that said he can get. Oh man, who was it? Something that said he can get more than a guy that I knew he should not be getting more than. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the number was high. The players he's going to find himself with, monetarily speaking, he's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And
well, I have him at 20, so there should not be 20 guys that he is being paid over at all. I think it's a great story. I love Mr. Irrelevant to the starting quarterback in a Super Bowl, played decent in it too. Like, great story. Not $50 million, which I fear he is going to make. Because the Niners have been looking for their quarterback for the last, since who? Like, when was the last time the 49ers had their quarterback? Since Steve Young? Like, they've just been, like, rotating quarterbacks back to back to back to back with good rosters. So, like, this is their best one in a while. They're probably going to want to stick with him. So I think that they actually probably will pay him, but I don't think they should. I think they should go Stafford and then rebuild from there.
I agree. Like, they're literally in the same spot the Rams were. Like, they had knocked on the door a couple times, weren't able to get it done. So you know what? Throw your chips in the middle of the table and give it your best shot, because that's what this league is about. It's about winning. Like, I know people are big on dynasties and trying to build for the future, but no one gives a shit about that if you win the Super Bowl. Like, people care, but if you go out and win, no one's thinking about tomorrow. Like, they're not. They're going to enjoy the moment. They're going to be happy about the moment because you succeeded. And, like, to your point, the Niners have been looking for their quarterback for so long, but Kyle Shanahan has proven that he can make it work with anybody. I think making a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy is quite an accomplishment,
100%
even if you didn't win. So why settle for a guy that you think could be your guy, but you're unsure? Like, I just feel like you'd be settling because you don't want to go out and look. It's like when you have a job that, you know, it's okay, but you know you could probably be making more somewhere else, but you don't want to go through the trouble of like the interview process and like learning the new role. So you just kind of sit comfortably where you are instead of like pushing your way out.
Well, it's probably because they tried one time and they drafted Trey Lance. They traded up for Trey Lance.
That's true too. That is fair. They're probably scarred.
Who had played like 15 college games and was in like the FCS level, and they're like, you know what, we've seen enough. Like, we're gonna trade like our entire future for Trey Lance.
Could you imagine like how we would view the Niners if Brock Purdy didn't happen? Like, Kyle Shanahan, he might not even be a coach right now.
Zach Wilson would be a Super Bowl quarterback by now. Zach Wilson would be a 49er. Oh my God.
You think so?
Yeah. I'll forever be on that train, especially when Zach Wilson goes to the Rams.
Okay.
And learns behind Matt Stafford.
I've seen like 6 guys that someone has said that about. Like, just throw him to McVay. It's like McVay's the quarterback mechanic. It's like just throw him in the McVay shop.
Yes, give him the Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah.
You know what? Kevin O'Connell should trade away McCarthy and let Darnold go. Like, I think that we're getting we're going to get Zach Wilson in there for cheaper, and we're going to fix everything up. No problem.
Why not Daniel Jones then? You already have You already have a reject with some sort of athleticism on your roster.
I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not high on Daniel Jones, but like I'm not as low on him as like the consensus is of this like putrid, like disgusting quarterback. Get off my screen! Like he's had some moments where I'm like, okay, that was all right. Like he made a playoff game. Like he's had a few times where I'm like, okay, this is reasonable. If he was paid $20 million instead of 40, we could have a conversation. But yeah, I think actually he would actually do all right if he had to play for the Vikings. I think he'd actually have a good season.
I think so too. I think so too. I think there's a chance that he doesn't go out as sad as Darnold did. Like,
yeah, I mean he's a runner at least. Like
yeah.
He can take off. Like he's a tough little quarterback. He's had to face like crazy adversity. Like his lines were horrible, his receivers were always horrible, except for one rookie this year. Like he's been through it. So let's give him a shot.
Yeah, I still think one of the biggest injustices of any quarterback I've seen over the last like 5 years was after their playoff run, if you can call it that. But they exceeded expectations that season, and it's like, okay, now this is when you go and get your young quarterback that you paid a receiver. So you can maybe help him out on offense because Isaiah Hodgins was his best pass catcher. And they go and sign fucking 31-year-old Darren Waller, who became the most hated human being in New York. And I have never forgiven New York for that because maybe they could have done something for Daniel, but they decided to take the hope that he gave them and squander it by signing him as the big offseason acquisition.
Dude, they had such a solid defensive foundation. They had like Xavier McKinney and like Julian Love. Like they had a couple guys that are like legitimately really good football players today. They had Saquon Barkley, who's the best running back. Like all they needed was an offensive line bolster and a couple weapons on as a receiver. And they're like, here, bitch, here's Kadarius Toney, first round pick. Here's Darius Slayton as like your top target. Like here's Wan'Dale Robinson, like a 5'6" running back. That's gonna be your slot receiver. Like, good luck. And then they're like, you need a tight end. Here's Theo Johnson. He's gonna be your starting tight end. Like, they don't care about him at all, which is why they cut him. Had Drew Lock in there. Like, they don't care. They're such an inept organization.
Oh man, yeah. I think you're right. Kevin O'Connell, trade McCarthy, get rid of Darnold, give Jones a chance, and
let's do it.
And we'll see. Just let it rock. You've proven you can make it work. Why not? Honestly, coaches should embrace that challenge. Like, why not? Who needs a good quarterback? I'm a good coach. I'm gonna make it work.
Be confident in your scheme.
Absolutely.
That's what it should be.
All right. Well, I think that's about all I had for our quarterback lists. Nothing too crazy.
No.
I feel like
we might be able to revisit this on. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I feel like people that would disagree with a lot of this are just trying to hate. Like I feel like this was foundationally sound.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to nitpick a few guys, but like generally speaking, they feel good to me. Neither of us were off on a guy except for maybe like a less than 5 spots away. Like there was nothing that was like one of us didn't have Dak at 9, the other one had him at like 19. Like we generally have the same train of thought on all of our guys, so that was good to see. Yeah, I mean, feel free to nitpick, but I'm not going to care. Like, by all means, but it's probably subject to change too. With free agency coming up, the tampering period in less than a month now, I believe. So, with who we got in the move? A-Rod, Russell Wilson, and Sam Darnold probably are a handful of these guys that will be changing teams possibly in the near future. So, when that coming up, we're probably going to get into team building, team rebuilding, drafting, free agency. That's some stuff that should be coming up in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that.
Yes, I'm excited to get into all of that stuff. Predicting landing spots, trades, cuts, all of that, draft picks. This is like my favorite time of year. So I'm looking forward to the next couple months. And then we can get really creative when everything dies down in the off season. So definitely stick around for all of that. And if you enjoyed episode 10 of Against the Blitz, feel free to like, subscribe, follow, comment, share. All of our socials for the pod down in the description. All of the socials for us individually down in the description. But thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.